Arthur Bankole drove that mop across the gleaming tiles of his 38th floor office with the focused aggression of a man who had spent 14 hours watching everything he built slowly begin to crack. His jacket was on the back of his chair. His cufflinks were on the desk beside a cold cup of coffee and a legal letter he had read 11 times. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and he was sweating slightly, and he did not care even a little bit. Funmi, his personal assistant, stood in the doorway in her coat with her handbag over her shoulder, watching him with the expression of someone who had long accepted that her boss was brilliant and completely unwell. "Oga Arthur," she said carefully. "It is almost midnight. We have lawyers. Very expensive lawyers. That is what they are there for." "The lawyers are not helping my brain," Arthur said, wringing out the mop with precise, practiced efficiency. "This is helping my brain. You are a billionaire mopping your own floor. And it is very clean. Go home, Funmi." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Sir, Adeyemi Cole Holdings sent that letter at 4 o'clock. Their legal team is not joking. If we do not respond by Friday." I said go home. He said it without anger, without looking up. Just quiet, absolute certainty. "I will think better when the floor is clean." Funmi left. She had learned years ago that when Arthur started cleaning, the best thing to do was disappear and pray. Arthur had cleaned this bathroom 17 times in 3 years. He found the grout particularly satisfying. He pushed open the restroom door, reached for the light switch, and stopped. Someone was already in there. A woman, gray jumpsuit, hair pulled back under a cap, crouched under the sink with a wrench in one hand and a small torch in the other. She was absolutely focused, twisting something on the pipe with calm, methodical precision, completely unbothered by the fact that it was midnight and she was alone in an executive bathroom on a floor that was supposed to be empty. Arthur stared at her. She did not look up. "You are the new night shift?" he said. She paused for half a second. "Just half." "Yes," she said. Her voice was low and even, with the particular smoothness of someone choosing their words carefully. "Pipe has a slow leak. I am fixing it." Arthur stepped into the bathroom, examined the sink from above with narrowed eyes, and crouched beside her uninvited. She leaned back slightly, more out of surprise than politeness. "You'll want to check the cartridge first before you touch the compression fitting," he said, in the full confident tone of a man who had watched exactly 4 YouTube tutorials on plumbing. 9 times out of 10, that's where the leak starts. She looked at him. He was close enough now that she could see the expensive watch on his wrist, the quality of his shirt fabric, the faint shadow of exhaustion under eyes that were, she noted, quite sharp. "Is that so?" she said. "And the lime scale around the base of the faucet. You see that white buildup? Equal parts white vinegar and baking soda. You leave it for 20 minutes, and it comes off clean. None of the harsh chemicals. This is Italian stone. You use the wrong product. You etch the surface, and then nobody will ever let you hear the end of it." There was a silence. Inside her head, Eleanor Adeyemi Cole, CEO of Adeyemi Cole Holdings, owner of Eco Tower and 11 other properties across Nigeria, a woman whose signature had this morning authorized a restructure proposal affecting 643 tenants, was experiencing something she had not experienced in a very long time. She was trying not to laugh. Not a polite, controlled laugh. A real one. The disrespectful kind that starts in the stomach. This man with his rolled sleeves and his confident crouch and his YouTube tutorial plumbing knowledge, explaining limescale removal to her in her own building, in a bathroom that she had personally selected the stone for after 3 separate site visits, and an argument with the contractor that had lasted 2 weeks. She pressed her lips together hard. "Thank you," she said. "Very useful. If you love a good story twist, don't go anywhere. But before we continue, do us a small favor. Like this video, drop a comment telling us, would you have corrected him? And if you're new here, subscribe. We do this every week. Okay, let's go." "Good." Arthur stood, satisfied, and reached under the cabinet for the cleaning supplies. "What is your name?" "Eleanor." "How long have you been working nights here, Eleanor?" "Not long," she said, which was technically true. She had arrived at 9 o'clock and had not expected to still be here at midnight. She had not expected any of this. "They have you fixing pipes on your first week?" "Typical." He shook his head with genuine irritation. "This building runs the staff into the ground. You need to push back. Know your worth." Eleanor turned back to the pipe so that he could not see her face. "I will keep that in mind," she said. Arthur Bankole, one of the most powerful men in Lagos, tied on a cleaning apron, got on his knees beside her and began scrubbing the grout around the base of the toilet with a brush and a spray bottle of homemade vinegar solution, humming quietly under his breath. Eleanor finished fixing the pipe, packed up her tools, and sat on the floor with her back against the cabinet for a moment, watching him. He was genuinely good at this. That was the most absurd part. The technique was correct. The angles were right. He was putting his back into it with the focused seriousness of a man who cared deeply about the outcome, and the grout was, objectively, getting cleaner. "You do this often?" she asked. "Every time my brain gets too full," he said without stopping. "People underestimate cleaning. It is the most honest work there is. You start with a mess. You finish with order. Very few things in business are that straightforward." She looked at him for a long moment. "What kind of business?" she said. "Tech, fintech." A short pause. "I run PayEasy Africa. Heard of it?" Eleanor had personally reviewed PayEasy Africa's lease file 4 days ago. She knew their revenue figures, their employee headcount, their debt structure, and the fact that they had never missed a payment in 6 years. "I think I have seen the name," she said. "Good company," Arthur said. And the way he said it was not boastful. It was the way someone talks about something they love. Quiet and certain and a little bit raw. "Started it for my mother. She used to walk 3 hours to collect her pension. 3 hours. I built the whole first version of the app on a laptop I was still paying installments on." He scrubbed. "Now some holding company wants to restructure our lease terms so aggressively, it will effectively push us out of this building. After 6 years." He stopped scrubbing for a moment. 6 years. The bathroom was very quiet. "That is a difficult situation," Eleanor said carefully. "The owner of this entire building," Arthur continued, sitting back on his heels, "is a woman called Eleanor Adeyemi. Have you heard of her?" Every single muscle in Eleanor's body held completely still. "I may have heard the name," she said. "She hides," Arthur said, with the unfiltered bluntness of a man who had no idea he was talking to the subject of his sentence. "Nobody ever sees her. She sends lawyers. She sends letters. She restructures leases through 3 layers of legal protection so that by the time the consequences land on actual people, her name is nowhere near it." He shook his head. "That kind of power without presence is just cowardice dressed in a good suit." Eleanor looked at her hands wrapped around the wrench. "Maybe," she said slowly, "she has reasons for being private. Maybe. But you cannot own people's livelihoods and hide from their faces. At some point, you must look them in the eye." He stood up, examined his work with satisfaction, and extended a hand to help her off the floor. She took it on instinct. His grip was solid and warm and completely unaware. "You are too smart to be fixing pipes forever," he said, looking at her with that direct, unguarded gaze. "If you ever want a proper job, PayEasy is always looking for people who actually work." Eleanor Adeyemi, whose net worth was cataloged quarterly in business magazines, whose company had 38 floors of this building on its balance sheet, who had fired and hired executives on 4 continents, nodded politely. "Thank you," she said. "I will think about it." He turned back to his cleaning supplies, satisfied. And that was the moment Eleanor made the decision that would change both of their lives. She did not correct him. Not tonight. She would go back to Abuja tomorrow, and that would be the end of it. A strange, funny midnight story she would never tell anyone. That was the plan. She did not go back to Abuja. She told her chief of staff, Beezy, that the Lagos property inspections required an extra week. Beezy, who had worked for Eleanor for 9 years and had learned to ask very few questions, rearranged the schedule without comment. Eleanor did not examine her own reasons too carefully. She was practical by nature. She found loose threads irritating. This, whatever this was, felt like a loose thread. On the second night, she came back. She found Arthur on the 38th floor again, this time polishing the glass partition between the reception area and the open office floor with a microfiber cloth, working in neat horizontal strokes with the methodical calm of a monk. She stood in the corridor and watched him for a moment before he noticed her. "You came back," he said, not sounding entirely surprised. "I forgot my wrench," she said. He looked at the tool bag she was carrying, which was clearly full and clearly had not been forgotten anywhere. He said nothing about this. "Come," he said. "I was about to take a break." The rooftop of Eco Tower was not, strictly speaking, accessible to maintenance staff. But Arthur had the access code. He had sweet-talked it out of the building manager 2 years ago, in exchange for a case of wine. And the rooftop at midnight, 42 floors above Victoria Island, with Legos spread out below in rivers of orange streetlight and blinking towers, was one of the most quietly beautiful places Eleanor had ever stood. And she had stood in many places. Emeka, Arthur's security man, materialized from somewhere with suya wrapped in newspaper and 2 cold Pepsis, handed them over without a word, and retreated to a respectful distance. They sat on the low concrete ledge at the edge of the rooftop. Not too close. The air smelled like Atlantic Ocean and generator exhaust, which was Lagos's particular perfume, and the suya was exactly the right temperature, still warm, charred at the edges. The snobs who work in this building during the day, Arthur said, chewing thoughtfully, have no idea this rooftop exists. They go from their cars to the elevator to their offices and back again. They never look up. He gestured at the skyline with his stick of suya. Lagos is up here. The real one. Eleanor looked at the city she had watched from boardrooms and helicopter windows and the back seats of armored cars. She had never sat on the ledge and eaten suya from newspaper. You come up here often? She asked. When I need to remember why I built the company, he said simply. On the bad days especially. Is today a bad day? He was quiet for a moment. Honest in the way he seemed to always be when he was not performing for anyone. Adeyemi Coal Holdings is increasing pressure on the lease. My lawyers are saying we may need to consider moving premises. He looked out at the city. But pay easy started in this building. Our first server was in a storage room on the 12th floor. Moving is not just expensive, it is. He stopped. It is like being evicted from a home. Eleanor chewed her suya. She had spent 4 days reviewing Pay Easy Africa's file. She had read the revenue numbers and the employee contracts and the compliance records. She had not read this part. This part was not in the file. Tell me about your mother, she said. The pension. How it started. He looked at her sideways. People in his world did not ask questions like that. They asked about valuations and market share and exit strategies. Why, he said. Because you mentioned her last night, and then you stopped, Eleanor said. And it seemed like there was more. Arthur looked at his Pepsi for a moment. And then he told her. Quietly, without the practiced smoothness of a man on a stage, he told her about a woman in Mushin who woke at 4 in the morning to make the journey to the pension office that was reliably open, unreliable about payments, and located 3 hours away by Danfo. Who came home with swollen feet, and sometimes nothing to show for it. Who never complained, but whose exhaustion Arthur had watched his entire childhood, absorbing it, cataloging it, filing it somewhere deep and purposeful. The first month Pay Easy processed pension payments, he said. She called me, and she was crying. She said, Arthur, it just came. It just came into my phone. Like a miracle. He smiled without looking up. It was not a miracle. It was a 2-year build with borrowed money and 3 failed prototypes. But hearing her voice that morning was the only success metric that ever mattered to me. The rooftop was very quiet except for Lagos breathing 42 floors below. Eleanor realized her suya was going cold, and she had not taken a bite in several minutes. You should not lose that building, she said. I know, he said. She wanted to say something else. The correct thing, the honest thing, was pressing against the inside of her chest with uncomfortable force. But the moment was balanced on something fragile, and she had not yet figured out what it was, and she did not want to break it. So she ate her suya, and he ate his. And Lagos glittered below them like a city full of other people's stories. On the 5th night, he showed up with hand cream. It was so unexpected that Eleanor stopped walking when she saw it. A small bag from the pharmacy on Amadabello Way, the kind that is always open, always lit too brightly, always smelling of disinfectant. He held it out without ceremony. Your hands, he said, not quite meeting her eyes. I noticed. The work is rough on them. Eleanor took the bag. Inside was the most expensive shea butter hand cream that pharmacy stocked, which was not, by her standards, expensive at all, but which he had clearly selected with some care, and which came in a green bottle that smelled like cocoa and raw shea. She looked at it for a long moment. She had a hand cream at her hotel that cost 40,000 naira and was shipped monthly from Paris. She had an esthetician in Abuja who treated her hands every 2 weeks with products whose ingredients she could not pronounce. This cream cost 900 naira. You shouldn't ruin those hands for a building that doesn't care about you, he he said, and his voice was gruff in the specific way of someone who is uncomfortable with the softness of what they are saying. Eleanor held the green bottle. She did not say, "This building is mine." She did not say, "I have staff whose entire job is the care of my hands." She did not say any of the 11 honest things lining up behind her teeth. She said, "Thank you." And she used it. Right there, sitting on the kitchen floor of the 38th floor break room, where they had started eating their late-night meat pies. She opened the bottle and used it, and the smell of cocoa and shea filled the small room. He watched her do it with an expression she couldn't quite classify, and then he looked away quickly at nothing in particular. "Good," he said. "That is better." They ate their meat pies. The 24-hour bakery on Alma Bello was rapidly becoming the most important address in Arthur's evening schedule, and neither of them said anything about this. "You are too quiet for a cleaner," he said on the 7th night. "Is that so?" Eleanor said. "Cleaners talk," Arthur said, with the confidence of someone who had interviewed exactly 0 cleaners. "My mother's friend, Mama Toyin, she knew everything about every family in the whole compound. Cleaners observe. They talk. You observe, but you never talk." "Maybe I prefer listening," Eleanor said. "To what?" "I do most of the talking." "Yes," she said. "You do." He paused, looked at her with sudden uncertainty, which was an unusual look on his face. Am I boring you?" "No," she said, and it came out before she could manage it. "Too honest. Too immediate." "No, you are not boring me." He looked at her for a moment longer than was entirely comfortable. Then he looked at his meat pie. "Right," he said. "Good." On the 11th night, he told her about the Ice Queen. It came out the way confessions do, not planned, not prepared, but loosened by tiredness and the specific intimacy of 2 people who have eaten 11 consecutive late-night meals together on the floor of an empty building. They were in the kitchen. Midnight had come and gone. Lagos outside the window was darker, quieter, the late-night Danfos replaced by the odd set of headlights crawling through the island. The meat pies were open between them. Arthur's tie was completely off. Eleanor's cap was on the floor beside her. Her hair was loose around her face, which Arthur had noticed but not commented on, because he was learning, slowly, that Eleanor did things in her own time. He had been quiet for several minutes. The quiet was different from his usual quiet. Heavier. 5 days, he said. I have 5 days before I have to go before the board of Adiemicol Holdings and beg. Eleanor picked at the edge of her meat pie. Beg. Request. Formally. He exhaled. I do not beg. I have never begged anyone for anything. But for pay easy, for the people who work there, I will walk into that boardroom and I will say whatever I need to say. What do you think she is like? Eleanor asked. The owner. Arthur leaned back against the cabinet. He looked at the ceiling. Cold, he said. Calculated. The kind of woman who looks at a company like mine and sees a revenue line. A lease figure. An asset on a spreadsheet. His jaw tightened. She does not see 800 employees. She does not see the market woman in Kadu who now collects her payment on her phone. She does not see my mother calling me crying because for the first time in her life, her money arrived without her having to beg for it. You do not know her, Eleanor said quietly. I know her type. People often think they know types, Eleanor said. And then they find out they were wrong. Have I been wrong about you? He said. And it was so direct and so unexpected that Eleanor felt it land somewhere behind her sternum. She looked at him. What do you mean? I assumed you were just starting out, finding your feet. But you are not. He was studying her with those sharp eyes. You are too settled for someone who is new to this work. Too still, like someone who has been somewhere bigger and come back down. He paused. What were you before? The kitchen was very quiet. Inside Eleanor, something shifted like tectonic plates. The weight of 11 nights of pretending, of managing the distance between what she was saying and what was true, pressed against her ribs with sudden intensity. She wanted to tell him. For the first time in 11 days of this strange, unplanned, midnight life she had fallen into, she genuinely wanted to tell him. Arthur, she said. Yes. What if the person you need to convince, the person in that boardroom, already believes you? He looked at her. The question sat between them, strange and weighted. What do you mean? He said slowly. I mean, she stopped. Started again. What if she has read your file? Looked at your company carefully. What if the lease restructure is not about pushing you out, but about, she caught herself. What if there is more to it than you know? Arthur was watching her with an expression she had not seen on him before. Alert, uncertain, something moving behind his eyes. Eleanor, he said slowly, how do you know about lease restructures? I read, she said quickly. Business news. You mentioned pay easy. The moment stretched. She could see him processing, weighing, almost arriving somewhere, and then he pulled back from it. The way people pull back from the edge of a thought that is too large to be comfortable. Maybe, he said finally. Maybe I am reading it wrong. He picked up his meat pie, looked at it. Or maybe she is exactly what I think she is, and I should go in there on Friday and just tell the truth. All of it. What the company started from. What it means. He looked up at Eleanor. You think that is enough? The truth. Eleanor looked at Arthur Bankole. Brilliant, stubborn, genuine Arthur, who mopped floors at midnight to calm his nervous system, who bought 900-naira hand cream for a woman he thought was a cleaner, who had built a billionaire company so that his mother would not have to walk 3 hours to collect what was already hers. Yes, she said. I think the truth is exactly enough. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that was not performed for anyone. It just happened. You are my good luck charm. You know that, he said. Eleanor picked up her meat pie so he would not see whatever was happening on her face. Don't be ridiculous, she said. That night, after Arthur left, Eleanor sat alone on the kitchen floor for a long time. Then she picked up her phone, dialed a number that rang twice before being answered with the crisp, alert efficiency of someone who was always half awake and waiting. Busy, Eleanor said. Yes, Ma. Prepare the partnership documents for PayEasy Africa. Full terms, fair restructure, equity clause. A pause. And bring them to the boardroom on Friday. I will review them that morning. A brief silence from Busy, who was excellent at her job precisely because she had learned that Eleanor Adeyemicole's decisions arrived without preamble and were not to be questioned. Noted, Busy said. Anything else? Eleanor was quiet for a moment, looking at the Lagos skyline through the glass. Leave space at the bottom of the final page, she said. Handwritten. I will add something myself. She hung up. She uncapped the green bottle of shea buttercream, rubbed a small amount between her palms, slowly, the smell of cocoa rising quiet and warm in the dark kitchen. Friday morning arrived with the efficiency of a thing that had been dreaded long enough to start feeling like relief. Arthur dressed with unusual care. Not the automatic precision of a man who always dressed well, but the deliberate attention of someone preparing for something important. He stood in front of his mirror at his Ikoyi house for a long moment. Navy Igbada over a fitted white shirt. His best shoes. His father's cufflinks, which he only wore when he needed courage he could feel the weight of. Funmi arrived at 8. She was also dressed carefully, which meant she understood. Are we ready? She said. We are ready, Arthur said, even though his heart was doing something very inconvenient in his chest. The boardroom on the 42nd floor of Eco Tower had been arranged overnight. Eleanor had not come to the building the night before, which was the first night in 2 weeks she had not appeared, and Arthur had sat in his office alone at midnight with a meat pie going cold beside him and the strange, specific discomfort of a person who does not realize they have built a habit until the moment it is broken. He did not think about this. He had a boardroom to walk into. The 42nd floor was different from every other floor of Eco Tower. No tenant signage. No company logos. Just glass and steel and the kind of silence that costs money to maintain. Arthur's shoes clicked on the floor as he walked down the corridor flanked by Funmi and 2 lawyers whose combined billing rate was enough to fund a school. The boardroom doors were closed. Heavy, dark wood. The kind of doors that are not designed to make you feel welcome. Arthur straightened his Igbada, touched his father's cufflinks once. Whatever happens in there, he said quietly, to no one in particular, we tell the truth. He pushed open the door. The room arranged itself around the long mahogany table like a painting. 6 lawyers on the far side, each with an identical black folder and an identical neutral expression. 2 aides against the wall, the Lagos skyline full and blazing through floor-to-ceiling glass behind an empty chair at the head of the table. Arthur took the seat on the near side. Funmi placed a folder in front of him. His senior lawyer, Chief Adekunle, adjusted his glasses and lowered himself with great dignity into the adjacent chair. They waited. The silence in the room was the active kind. Not empty, full. Full of the particular tension of people who know that whatever is about to happen is going to be significant. Arthur looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. The Ice Queen's chair. He had imagined it occupied by someone older, more angular, with the cold efficiency of a person who had never been moved by anything as inconvenient as a story. The door behind him opened. He heard it before he turned. Heard the change in atmosphere, the subtle shift of air pressure that happens when someone who commands rooms enters one. Heard the precise click of heels on marble. Heard the rustle of the lawyers on the far side straightening, folders adjusting, postures correcting. He turned. The first thing he registered was burgundy. A structured power suit in deep, rich burgundy that had clearly been made for exactly this woman's shoulders. Then pearl earrings. Then heels that added 4 inches to a height that was already considerable. Then hair, immaculate, natural, swept back with absolute authority. Then the face. The world did not slow down. It did not behave like a film. It behaved like a system error, the specific stuttering freeze of a brain trying to load information that fundamentally does not compute. Arthur Bankole stood up. His chair scraped back. Funmi looked at him, then at the door, then made a sound she immediately suppressed. "Eleanor," Arthur said. His voice came out very careful, very measured, in the way of a man applying enormous force of will to keep the surface of himself flat, while everything beneath it lurched violently sideways. Eleanor Adeyemi Cole walked to the head of the table. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. She moved with the complete composure of a woman who had walked into high-stakes rooms every day for 20 years and had never once let the room see her sweat. She placed her hands on the back of the chair. She looked at Arthur. "Good morning, Mr. Bankole," she said. "I believe you requested this meeting." The 6 lawyers on her side of the table were completely still. Beezy, at the wall, was looking at the far corner of the ceiling. Chief Adekunle, beside Arthur, was making the expression of a very senior lawyer who has learned that the most dangerous moments in any room are the ones that feel personal. Arthur's brain was running several processes simultaneously and completing none of them. "What?" He stopped. "Eleanor, what are you doing here? You need to leave. Right now." Before, his voice lowered urgently. "The owner of this building is about to walk into this room. If she finds you in here, in these, you need to go. Now. I will explain later." Nobody at the table moved. Eleanor pulled out her chair, sat down with the unhurried grace of a woman who had never in her life been late to sit at a table that was hers. She opened the black folder in front of her, looked up at Arthur. "Arthur," she said. "Eleanor, I am serious, please." "Arthur," quieter this time, and something in the register of it, the tone, the stillness underneath it, got through. He stopped. "I told you," she said, holding his gaze, "that the owner of this building was a neat freak." A pause so small it would have fit inside a heartbeat. "I simply did not tell you it was me." The boardroom performed a silence that had actual texture. Arthur stood behind his chair with both hands resting on its back, and the only sound was Lagos, 20 floors of it, muted through the glass, going about its enormous, indifferent business outside. He looked at Eleanor, at the burgundy suit and the pearl earrings and the 6 lawyers and the aides standing at the wall with a face trained toward the ceiling. He looked at the empty space where his image of her had been a moment ago, the gray jumpsuit, the wrench, the rooftop, the meat pies, the kitchen floor, the green bottle of hand cream, and watched it press itself flat under the weight of the truth that had been sitting there all along. "You," he said softly. "This whole time." "Yes," she said. "The pipe. I fixed it. It was dripping. It annoyed me. The limescale." His voice had gone very quiet. "I explained to you how to remove limescale. In your own bathroom. You were very thorough. I told you to apply for a job." He said it like a man pressing carefully on a bruise to understand how large it is. "I told you I would write you a reference." "I am still considering it," she said, and something flickered at the corner of her mouth that in other circumstances might have become a smile. Arthur pulled out his chair slowly and sat back down. Not because he had decided to, but because his legs arrived at the decision slightly before he did. His senior lawyer leaned close and murmured something. Arthur did not respond. "You lied to me," he said. "I never lied to you," Eleanor said, and her voice was still level, but something in it had changed texture slightly. Something careful. "I omitted. There is a difference. For 2 weeks. Yes. Every night. Yes." Arthur put his hands flat on the table. He looked at them. He looked at her. His jaw was working slightly. "I called you a good girl," he said. "I gave you cleaning tips. I told you the owner of this building was a coward, Eleanor said, dressed in a good suit. I remember. The room was absolutely still. Arthur looked up at her, and in his face was something that was not just anger, though anger was there. There was something rawer than anger underneath it. The specific pain of a person who had been real with someone, had been genuinely, unguardedly real, and is now renegotiating what that exposure means. Why, he said. Why keep going? The first night I understand. But you came back. Eleanor held his gaze. Because, she said, you were the first person who had spoken to me like a person in longer than I can accurately remember. And I was not ready for it to stop. The room absorbed this. Chief Adekunle was studying the table's surface with the focused intensity of a man who has decided he is not in this room. I also, Eleanor continued, and her voice was slightly less level now, which for Eleanor Adeyemikole was the equivalent of a full emotional disclosure, needed to understand what this company actually was. Before I made a decision about it, she opened the folder to a specific page. I had the numbers, the file, the compliance reports. She looked at Arthur. I did not have the story. I did not have your mother. Arthur was very still. And now, he said. Now, Eleanor said, I have a proposal. She slid the document across the mahogany table. 38 pages. Arthur looked at it for a moment before pulling it toward him. His lawyer immediately leaned in. Arthur held up one hand. Wait, and turned to the last page himself. He read the terms slowly. His expression moved in small, controlled increments. The restructure was not punishing, it was generous. Genuinely, thoughtfully generous. The kind of terms that required knowing what a company actually was, not just what it was worth. He turned to the final paragraph. Read the equity clause. Read the partnership structure. Then he saw the bottom of the page. Below the official letterhead, below the signature lines and the legal stamps and the clause numbers, in ink that was slightly different from the printed text, handwritten in the clean, precise script of someone who made decisions and wrote them down like they meant them. Penalty clause, non-negotiable Arthur Bankole to personally maintain cleanliness standards of CEO's private office every Friday night. Meat pies provided by the party of the first part. Arthur read it twice. A third time. Looked up. Eleanor was looking at the window. Her jaw was held in the specific way of a person applying significant internal effort to keep their face composed. Chief Adekunle had read it over Arthur's shoulder and was now also studying the ceiling, which seemed to be doing excellent work today. Funmi, who had read it from across the table, had her hand pressed flat over her mouth. Arthur Bankole, who had not laughed, genuinely, helplessly laughed, in longer than he could cleanly remember, felt it start somewhere below his ribs. He pressed his lips together. It didn't work. He tried again. The laughter was the kind that had decided it was leaving, regardless of what his face intended. It came out. Not a polite chuckle. Not a managed smile. A real laugh. Full, bright, completely undignified. That bounced off the mahogany and the glass and the serious walls of the 42nd floor boardroom of Eco Tower and made every lawyer in the room blink. Eleanor turned back from the window. She had lost the battle with her face. The smile was there. The real one, not the boardroom version. The one Arthur had spent 11 nights catching in glimpses, the one that made her look like herself. Your mop, Arthur said, still laughing, pressing one hand to the table to steady himself. I saw your mop that first night, the one you brought with the supplies. It had a telescopic handle. Imported, she confirmed. From where? Germany. Of course. He shook his head, laughing, and the laughter was shifting into something softer at the edges. I stood there and lectured a woman with a German imported telescopic mop about cleaning technique. You were very confident, she said. I am always very confident. It is my most consistent character flaw. He looked at her across the table. The laughter had settled, but the warmth of it was still in his eyes. The hand cream, he said. Eleanor looked at her hands. She had used the green bottle every night since he gave it to her, even after returning to her hotel with its 40,000 naira Parisian alternative. I still have it, she said. Quietly. Something moved through the room between them that was not legal or professional or boardroom appropriate in any particular way. Chief Adekunle gathered his papers with diplomatic efficiency. Beezy found something important to look at on her phone. Two of Eleanor's lawyers developed a sudden shared interest in the view. Arthur picked up the pen. He looked at the penalty clause one more time. Then at Eleanor. Who provides the Pepsi? He said. That was not in the clause, she said. You can negotiate. I want the Pepsi included. Then you should have brought a better lawyer. Arthur looked at Chief Adekunle. Chief Adekunle looked at the clause. It is not an unreasonable ask, the senior lawyer said carefully. Do not help him, Eleanor said. And now she was fully smiling, and every person in the room felt the temperature change in the best possible way. Arthur signed. The lawyers signed. The aides signed. Beezy organized the copies with swift precision. And when all of it was done, the papers filed, the folders closed, the formal architecture of the meeting concluded, the lawyers on both sides began the quiet shuffle of packing up. Could everyone, Arthur said, without looking up from the table, give us the room, please? The lawyers looked at Eleanor. Eleanor gave a small nod. The room emptied with the practiced efficiency of people who understood that some conversations were not for them. The boardroom door clicked shut. They were alone on the 42nd floor for the first time. The city spread beyond the glass in every direction, brilliant and enormous, Lagos in full daytime fury. The traffic a slow, honking river on the roads below, the Atlantic glinting at the horizon, cranes at construction sites moving in slow arcs against the blue. Arthur turned to look at Eleanor. She was still at the head of the table. Her hands were flat on the surface in front of her, and she was looking at them. Eleanor, he said. I know, she said. You should have told me. I know. On the third night, if not the first. On the fifth. You should have told me before I said everything I said about. I know, Arthur. She looked up. I know. And I am sorry. Not for staying. But for the way it must feel right now. That is not what I intended. He looked at her for a long moment. At the person who had eaten suya on a rooftop and sat on kitchen floors and listened to him with the focused, unhurried attention of someone who had nowhere else to be, even though she had everywhere else to be. Did any of it cost you anything? He said. The time. The nights. Was it just research? It was the right question. The exact right question. Eleanor felt it the way you feel the thing that someone has been holding back saying. No, she said. And her voice was very level, which with Eleanor was the sign of something very real. It was not research. The first night was an accident. After that, it was, she paused. I came back because I wanted to. Every time. That is the truth. Arthur exhaled slowly. You told me, he said, that the truth was enough. Yes, she said. I did. Was that for you or for me? Eleanor was quiet for a moment. The ghost of something, amusement, regret, something that lived between the two, passed through her expression. Both, she said. Arthur pushed back his chair, stood, walked around the long table until he was standing beside her. Not too close. The right distance for two people who have been honest and are figuring out what honesty means for what comes next. He reached into the inside pocket of his agbada, pulled out a small green bottle. Eleanor stared at it. It was a new one. Same pharmacy. Same 900-naira cocoa shea cream in the green bottle with the slightly faded label. He must have bought it before the meeting, before the boardroom, before whatever this morning was going to be. I know you can afford better, he said. Yes, she said. I know this is probably the least impressive thing anyone has ever given you. It is not, she said, and she said it fast enough that it surprised both of them. He set it on the table in front of her. Still, he said, the offer stands. It is a good cream. Eleanor picked up the bottle. She looked at it, at the unimpressive label and the modest size and the complete sincerity of the gesture. The same sincerity that had been present from the first night, unchanged by boardrooms or burgundy suits or the disclosure of net worth. She uncapped it. The smell of cocoa and shea butter rose into the air of the serious 42nd floor boardroom, and it was so completely incongruous and so completely right that Eleanor laughed. Her real laugh, the one she almost never gave anyone. I cannot believe, she said, still laughing, that you brought this here. I was covering my bases, Arthur said, and he was smiling now, the full one, the one she had been cataloging for 11 nights. If the meeting went badly, I was going to say it was a peace offering. If it went well, then it is what it is, he said, which is me telling you that I noticed your hands and I bought you something for them. Same as before. Eleanor held the small bottle and looked up at Arthur Bankole, who was wearing his father's cufflinks, who had built a company because a woman in Mushin used to walk 3 hours for what was already hers, who scrubbed grout at midnight to quiet his brain, who had looked at Eleanor, gray jumpsuit, wrench in hand, floor level at midnight, and given her hand cream without needing to know who she was first. Friday, she said, "You will need your own equipment. I am not lending you my mop. I have a perfectly good mop. You do not. I have seen your mop. The head is uneven. My mop has been cleaning floors since before you started importing from Germany. That is not the flex you think it is." They were arguing, but there was no heat in it. Only the warm, practiced ease of two people who had already spent 11 nights in the particular intimacy of small hours in dark buildings, and the kind of conversation that only happens when nobody is watching. On the rooftop that night, they sat in their usual places on the low concrete ledge. Emika had produced the meat pies. The Pepsi was cold. Lagos breathed below them, enormous and indifferent and beautiful. It was the same rooftop, the same city, the same newspaper wrapping around the suya. Everything else was different and the same, all at once. "Tell me something you have never told anyone in a boardroom," Arthur said. Eleanor thought about it seriously. "I hate long tables," she said. "They put too much distance between people. I have always found them performative." Arthur gestured at the rooftop, the low ledge, the concrete, the city below them. "And this? This is better," she said. He handed her a meat pie. She handed him the hand cream as she had done it every night, and he set it aside in the way he always did, as though keeping it close, and Lagos did what Lagos always does. Kept moving, kept breathing, kept being itself beneath two people who were, cautiously and seriously, and with full awareness of the risk involved, beginning to choose each other. This is a story about the walls we build to survive. Arthur built his from work and seriousness and the performance of someone who always knows what he is doing. Eleanor built hers from distance, from glass and lawyers and gray jumpsuits and the careful management of who got close enough to see her as a person rather than a position. What dismantled both walls was not strategy. It was the smallest things, the truth spoken without agenda, attention given without expectation, cream bought for hands that did not need it, simply because someone noticed and cared. The lesson is not that honesty is easy. Eleanor's silence caused real pain. Arthur's assumptions about who Eleanor was, who she must be, were a wall too, built from the same bricks as his image of the Ice Queen. We are all capable of deciding who someone is before we have given them the space to show us. The deeper lesson is about presence. Eleanor Adeyemi Cole owned an entire tower, but had not truly been present in it until she sat on its kitchen floor at midnight in a gray jumpsuit and remembered what it felt like to be spoken to without an agenda. Arthur Bancole ran a Billionaire company, but had not felt genuinely settled in years until a quiet woman on a rooftop listened to him with full attention and no ulterior motive. What we build with our hands and our names is not always where we actually live. And the final lesson, the one written in 900-naira hand cream and a handwritten penalty clause, and two people arguing about mop quality on the 42nd floor of a Lagos skyscraper, is that the people worth keeping are the ones who see you accurately and stay anyway. Eleanor saw Arthur at his most unguarded and decided he was worth saving. Arthur, when the shock cleared, saw Eleanor in full, the power, the distance, the loneliness inside it, and showed up on Friday with his cleaning supplies regardless. They are both right. They are both a little wrong. That is, in the end, what makes it real. Thank you so much for staying until the very last word. If this story kept you company tonight, if it made you feel something, please like this video and leave a comment below. Tell us, are you an Arthur or an Eleanor? Do you build your walls with noise or with silence? And if you are not subscribed yet, please do. There is more where this came from. Every week, stories built to stay with you. We will see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves. And never underestimate the person fixing the pipe in your building.